Up next on Inside ChampCar, Life in the Fast Lane. Welcome to Inside ChampCar. I'm Bill Strong. Brian is on assignment in Alaska this week, and I'm joined today by kart and IndyCar crew chief, ChampCar and ChampCar Ford Focus builder, and racer Bernie Myers. Bernie, welcome.
Strong.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm all right, Bernie. How you doing, buddy?
Things are great.
I was reading something about Ken Miles a little earlier. I don't know why I did that.
I understand.
So Brian's on assignment somewhere in Alaska, vacation assignment. I don't know, some super top secret thing with his daughter. And so I'm actually doing the show this week. I believe the sound is working, so we'll leave that alone for now. The show is being produced not in Los Angeles, but in beautiful, really hot and kind of dark Piney River, Virginia. So I'd like to say hi to everybody out there. I got a lot of new followers on Facebook. Hopefully they're watching this from our dirt track race in the last couple of weeks, which has been fun, actually. So Bernie, you've done some dirt track stuff over the years.
I have.
So those little tiny, I don't know what they call them, the little wing cars, right? Sprint cars?
No, I never did any sprint. Well, actually, I ran our local track here. They run stock cars and midgets. Myself and a group of guys did some running of the races, but I never actually did a sprint car race or midget race or anything on dirt. Dirt's for growing potatoes. Asphalt is for racing, Bill. So, but did a lot of the IndyCar stuff. Worked for Dale Coyne Racing for 20 years, from 1982 to roughly 2002. So I think that was kind of the heyday, so to speak, of what kart was, with several engine manufacturers and chassis manufacturers. One time, there was two sets of tires, Firestone and Goodyear. It was kind of a big battle all the time with chassis manufacturers fighting each other, every engine manufacturer trying to squeeze out a little bit more RPM and horsepower. Things are a little different nowadays. Things are a lot more, spec, so to speak, like NASCAR is. But it's a different type of racing. We had a little bit harder weekends than what they do now. They can go 2,400 miles, I believe, on a Chevrolet or a Honda now. We'd go 400. So there was a lot of times where we would change an engine 2 or 3 times a weekend. We had a mileage out turbos, mileage out headers. Sometimes we'd have, let's say, 200 miles left on a fuel pump. Well, we'd run it on Friday to mileage it out and have to change it Friday night. Well, the fuel pump's in the bottom of the fuel cell. So you got to pull the engine back and get in there and change that. So it was a lot more work back then than what it is nowadays.
So you said 400 miles on an engine. What did you do during the 500-mile races?
They made specific engines for that. A lot of the engines we ran, like I said, they were so on the edge. They had one piston ring in them.
Oh, wow.
Just to save resistance. So they burned a lot of oil, and they'd go 400 miles, and that's it. You have to have it rebuilt. But they'd put an engine together with different pistons and different rings, a little bit less RPM. On day, we could only run maybe 30, 40 laps. Now they run 100 because they could run so many miles on an engine. So for the 500 at Indy and Pocono and Michigan, Fontana, the Cosworth and Chevrolet and Honda, Toyota, they all built a special specific engine to do 500 miles plus.
Now, one of the things I was looking for pictures of your racing days back with the IndyCar program, and I found some really cool ones. And here we are. We're going to show them there. Lots of pictures of fans and racers all lined up at the Indy 500. There, you see the cars 3 wide. There's your Champ car that you've worked on and built, and then the rest of the pictures is basically, there you guys are at Indianapolis with ChampCar. Let me get to the other pictures here, which is pretty funny. Well, not these. These are all the team photos. You think I would have done a little more research into these photos, but there's Lonnie Unser. But, here you are changing the right front wheel on the 19 car. Yellow and red. I love those colors. That's an awesome color. But most of the pictures are like this, where you're pushing the car around. What's up with that? It's like every picture that I found is you guys pushing the cars somewhere.
There was a lot of those. It was a tradition for a long time at the Indianapolis 500 that you had to be on the grid with your car by 8 o'clock. And they didn't allow golf carts. So every team had to take their car, push it all the way back to pit entrance, and then push it onto the grid wherever their starting position would be. They'd obviously take the starter cart with them and have to push and steer the car to their starting spot. It was probably in the late 90s, early 2000s, where they finally allowed golf carts to go out to the grid with your car, so you can pull it out there and then take your toolbox and all your equipment back. But USAC was a bit strange back in the day. They were all very set in their old ways and traditions, especially at the Indy 500. So that was one of the traditions, was having to take your car and push it out to the grid instead of pull it out there with a tugger.
Yeah.
Every Sunday morning, there's 33 pictures from a photographer that's taking that shot for the guys.
Now, one of the we're doing this show for ChampCar, and which is of course not the open wheel ChampCar anymore, but the Endurance Series. Now, is there much difference in setup between a ChampCar weekend and a ChampCar weekend?
As far as setting up for the race?
Yeah, I mean, it's all basic.
The ChampCar races currently that we do, it's a much shorter weekend. But if there's a Friday practice, we'll get there Thursday. If there's not, get there Friday and set up. And then the Saturday and Sunday really go by quick. And we start early in the morning and usually at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. And then the races go till 5 if it's a 7 or 8 hour race. So it's really a condensed weekend, I think, compared to what we used to do. We used to, if it was a travel to race, we would drive on a Wednesday and get there Wednesday night. If we flew, we'd sometimes get there Wednesday night or Thursday morning. But there was a lot of stuff to set up. Had to set up the transporter and the tent. Everybody had these fancy snap together tiles that we put on the floor underneath the tent. Toolboxes, wheel carts, go to Firestone to get all your tires mounted. And then there was a big timing stand to set up in the pits and all your nitrogen bottles and wheel guns. So it was a full day on Thursday of getting everything all set up and all put in place.
And you had fueling rigs back then on pit lane, right?
Yeah. There were big stainless steel rigs that held like 280 gallons, I think, of methanol. So we'd set those up and have a hose for practice, like a regular pump hose that you'd get at a gas station, and then obviously change it to the big fueling probe for the race itself. And then things would start up. We'd usually have 2 practice sessions on Friday, sometimes 2 practice sessions in qualifying, and then the same thing on Saturday, then the race Sunday. So back then we spent a lot of on-track time. Now the days are, sometimes they only race Saturday and Sunday. 1 practice session maybe on Friday, so things are a lot more condensed there also. But back in the day, there was a lot of time spent at the racetrack on weekends, and things were opened up so much with testing and overseas races and that. There were many years where we'd be on the road 245 days a year, just spending time at the racetrack or traveling to and from.
So when you arrived at the track, you worked as a crew chief, as a tire changer, all kinds of jobs in the series. What was the most fun for you to do?
People ask me that now. I haven't done it in so long. They ask you, I ask if I miss it. And I miss the guys, all the people that were involved with it. And I miss that hour and a half on Sunday, that time where we were actually on the racetrack doing race strategy, doing pit stops, changing the right front tire, outside tire, whether it was left or right. Those are the times that I really miss the most. Away from that, boy, it was a lot of late nights and 7-day weeks and 31 days a month of continuous work on the car. And like I said, they were so on the edge, everything had to be maintained and replaced all the time. Otherwise, you'd end up not finishing the races on Sunday.
So there really is no difference between a 50-cent part on a ChampCar and a 50-cent part on a ChampCar.
There really isn't. If you don't do your maintenance and homework and preparation on your current Champ car, you're kind of in the same boat. You gotta look at your bearing, look after your bearings, look after the drive shafts, keep all the fluids changed, make sure the radiator's clean. There's a lot of not as many things to go through, but if you're wise, you have to do all these maintenance things so you don't have any trouble during your practice or the races on a Champ car weekend.
How hard was it? You had to fight against teams that had all the money in the world, had Andretti's on their team or AJ's. How hard was it back then to race?
It was extremely tough, especially in the early days. Now the Dallara that they currently use, I think that thing was built like in 2012 was its first year that it was built, and they've had updates on it, but it's been virtually the same car for a long, long time. Back then, everybody bought 2 brand new cars every year, whether you needed it or not. You bought new Lolas or bought new Renards, and you got them. You'd had to go through them, take them all apart, learn, make new tooling and new fixtures to be able to work on the cars. It was preparation was a lot different. Everything had to come apart and be re-greased, re-oiled. The engines, like I said, we would have 4 or 5 of them at the shop, and then put clutches on them and water tubes and headers and have them all prepped, ready to go. So when we did an engine change, it made it that much simpler and that much quicker to do. There was all setup changes. The engineer was the last guy to come out of his office with a sheet of paper and say, "Here, this is the setup." So you're on the setup pad, changing the corner weights and cambers and toes and making sure the right heights and wing angles and everything are what he wants. We get to the racetrack, car goes right on the pad, and recheck everything all again. So we have a reference of what everything is set at. So if we make a wing change in the pit lane, we know what it is from the pad, so we can make that change in the pit lane and know that it's an accurate thing to do. There's a lot of times too where we didn't have the luxury of having new cars. Many times we would run a year-old chassis and possibly a year-old spec engine, just because that's all that was in the budget. There was things we did that we probably shouldn't have.
Yeah, I was going to ask that.
Some things.
Could you tweak? Did you put the Dale Coyne tweak on certain items? Customize it.
We did some things that. Let me put it this way: we got caught cheating several times, but it was always unintentional. The rear wing was 2,000 or 20 thousandths too high. The floor was 100 thousandths too low. We changed from cast iron rotors to carbon fiber rotors at Michigan one year, and the engineer got the weight wrong for the ballast we had to add. We were underweight. So these are all things we got caught at, but we're never doing intentionally. But I probably will say that we did some things we shouldn't have and never got caught doing them.
There you go.
But again, it was, we were behind the 8 ball. We had to do a couple things to try and be competitive and at least try and keep up with the guys that had new engines and new chassis. When we did have the luxury of having all that new stuff like everybody else, the best we ever did was running a car stock. The 98, 99, 2000 Lolas were perfect right out of the box.
Oh, really?
So we never, the engineers knew how to build that car, what ride height the aero worked the best at. But we would never mess with any of those things. It was much in the much earlier days. Maybe over a non-alcohol beer, Bill, we'll have a little talk about some of the things we did. And some I say were awfully clever that we did, and no, we never got caught doing it. So
yeah, I've been around racetracks enough to kind of, and talking to people that have been around racetracks a long time, some of the stories are like, never thought of that. Never thought of that. Of course, I'm not going to say anything.
And we did at the same time.
Yeah.
We know other people were cheating.
Oh, yeah. Fudging the rules.
I know for a fact Penske was using traction control on the years that traction control was illegal, but they couldn't be policed.
Yeah.
And he got away with it.
Well, it happened in Formula One as well. I mean, I think Mansell's cars, or was it Senna's? I don't know. I think it was Mansell's cars was using it at one point. So, yeah. Was that a big shock when Mansell came over after he retired from Formula One, came over here?
It was a huge shock. Carl Haas and Paul Newman they want to win, and they'll spend whatever it takes in order to win. And a funny story to go with that is Carl Haas was on the phone with Nigel Mansell. He was in England, and Carl was talking to him, trying to get him to come over, and they were talking about the finances and whatnot. And Mansell says, "Can you hold on for a second? I got another call." So he takes another call for a few minutes, and Carl holds on the line. And Nigel comes back and says, "It was the Queen of England." The Queen of England was trying to get Nigel Mansell to stay racing in Formula One and racing in England. But as it turned out, Carl Haas won that battle with the Queen, and Nigel Mansell came over here and ran the next year and won the championship.
Yeah, that was crazy. You know, I remember in the kart days, there was always this competition. As Formula One drivers, are they better than the kart drivers? And you know, I was one of those that was on the kart side only because, you know, American, and we did have some really good drivers back then.
There was, absolutely. But a couple of those guys had absolutely incredible kart control. Mansell was one of them. Not Alessandro Sampedri.
Zanardi?
Juan Montoya.
Oh, yeah.
Zanardi. All those guys had just phenomenal kart control. And Nigel picked it up really quick. He expected to be fast on the road courses and thought he'd struggle on the ovals, but actually it worked out the other way around. He won several races on the ovals and actually got a hang of that pretty quick. The first race of the year that he came here, maybe the second or third, we were at Phoenix.
Yeah, he wrecked really bad.
Yeah, he came in and told the crew, "I can go flat in one."
Yeah.
And the crew said, "No, don't go flat in one." So sure enough, he tried to go flat in one, backed it in the wall, put a big hole in the concrete wall. He wasn't knocked unconscious, but he got his head rattled a little bit, so he couldn't race on Sundays. So I think after that, he learned to listen to the crew a little bit more.
I was listening to, he was talking to this female podcaster somewhere. I forget where it was. It was like last year. And he was talking about that. And he had an injury that was kind of rare, but it was something that happened to IndyCar racers where they get a split in their bottom when they hit. And he had a really bad tear down there. And that was one of those things that stuck with me. It's like the injuries back then were just incredible. What some of these guys took.
Yeah. He spent most of that year in pain.
Yeah.
But after missing Phoenix, he went to every race after that and put up with it and was able to have great results. That's a testament to how competitive he is and how he can put up with that such pain to be able to get in the car and perform flawlessly every weekend.
Now we had the Unsers, the Mears, or Rick Mears, and so many famous names in IndyCar racing. They branched out and did other racing, and we even had some Unsers and some NASCAR folks racing ChampCar and ChampCar through the years. You guys brought some over. You brought Lonnie Unser and Johnny Unser over from that side, and they did some endurance racing with us. The first one was at
Indianapolis. Yeah. The first year we raced Indy in 2019.
Yeah.
I called some of the drivers that drove for us. I thought would want to come to, especially to race Indy, and come have some fun with us. Michelle Jourdain and Brian Till and Alessandro Zampedri, and then finally Johnny Unser drove for us with Ruger Guns as a sponsor back in the mid-90s. And I know Lonnie had done some Miata races there, I believe, like the year before. So she had some experience at the track. There was no practice day at Indy on the Friday. Whoever was on the track Sunday, that was the first laps on the road course. So we knew she had some experience. So I had called Johnny and said, "Hey, we're doing the Indy road course. Would Lonnie like to come join us?" So we put the deal together, and sure enough, she came in and she was faster than our two cars. We had the silver car there and the black car, and she was faster than 9 other drivers in our silver number 38. So just talented kid. She asked all the right questions. For such a young age, had a lot of experience at that, and was pretty knowledgeable about what she wanted, and she did a great job that weekend. We hope to do it again if we go back to Indy in the next few years. Ask her to do it again.
Yeah, I was watching a Mobile One commercial recently with Lonnie in it, and going up Pikes Peak, and I'll tell you, that girl is she's doing so well right now.
Yeah, that and Johnny, she was brought up good because Johnny was a great guy,
Yeah.
a real polite, clean cut guy. Did well with us when he ran a Cosworth Lola with us for 2 seasons on and off. And Lonnie, along with the Unser family, is synonymous with the Pikes Peak Hill Climb,
Yep.
and she picked up on that pretty quick last year and this year doing it. And yeah, the Unser name, everybody knows the Unser. The Unser family's won Indianapolis more than any other family in the history of the Indy 500. So you know they've got some talent.
Right. And there was a lot of
9
them.
times.
Yeah, there was a lot of them. I mean, they have roads named after them in Albuquerque.
And probably elsewhere too.
Yeah.
And Bobby was such a great storyteller. And we hung out with Bobby and Al Senior, Al Junior for many, many years, both at the 500 and during the all the kart races too.
So when you were at in the IndyCar era, did you hang out with other crew chiefs and kind of get information from each one, or did you guys help each other out much like we do in ChampCar now? I mean, we get crew chiefs together and they do help each other out to a certain extent.
The ChampCar guys nowadays are a lot more helpful from one team to another, giving of information. I will say on the IndyCar side, everybody was happy to give you something if you needed it. If you needed an NAS bolt or a drive shaft or a piece of carbon or a windscreen or whatever, if you needed parts, they're always happy to help you. You walk in somebody's transport and they're working on shocks, they take a rag and cover up the shocks.
Right.
So when it gets to sharing any of the technical data at all, we got a little bit from Newman Haas because Carl was the distributor for Lola and we had always bought Lolas. So we had a relationship with them. And then my wife worked for Newman Haas Racing for some 21 years. So they were a little bit more forward giving of, a little bit of setup, adjustments and some suggestions on what to run at different courses. But for the most part, nobody wanted to share. And I'm sure it's the same way today. Nobody wants to share that little thing that you think you might have found to make your car a little bit better. People do eventually catch up and figure out what's going on, but you don't ever want to share any of that stuff ahead of time.
Did you guys ever do any deception, fake parts or fake bits or whatever, make something different than everybody else is using?
I think there was a little bit of that going on, only just to mess with the other guys. You would do something completely off the wall, and then next week you'd see it on everybody else's car, just because they think that it's going to work. So it was just one of those things that you would try and do just to mess with people. Just little tiny funny things, splitters at different places or different angles on some of the little carbon pieces you had in front of the rear tires.
Right.
A wicker build, like you push out with something really obscene and then change it before you go off to practice. So it was mostly just to mess with the other guys.
Yeah. Now, which were your favorite to do, street or the street courses or the ovals, the road courses? Ovals.
I enjoy street courses and road courses from the calling of the race, from the strategy that goes with it. Ovals are a little bit easier to call. It's yellow and the pit closes. Well, you got a couple minutes to decide what you're going to do. On the ovals, it also is more of the team, so to speak. I don't care who you are, you're not going to overdrive a car and make it competitive on an oval if it's not set up right. Rick Mears couldn't handle a car that wasn't set up right. You look at the last weekend in Iowa, Joseph Newgarden was on rails. He's really good in traffic, and he had a great car. So that made it for Joseph Newgarden over those 2 days was he had a well set up car. On a road course, the driver can make up a little bit of a handicap that you might have with not enough horsepower, not enough aero, not enough mechanical grip. But the road course is a little bit more fun to call because it's a little more spontaneous. You got to think about it a little quicker, be more prepared ahead of time. Whereas the ovals, like I said, it goes yellow.
Yeah.
Pits are closed. It's pretty easy to tell whether you're going to pit or not. The only time where it becomes a little bit difficult on oval during green flag stops. Sometimes you want to pit early so you don't get caught out on a yellow. Sometimes you want to go long as you can so you can make the last stint a little shorter. Maybe pit a little earlier so it doesn't take as long to put fuel in. There's a lot of little things that will go into your decision whether to pit or not.
Now, have you raced with the Flagtronics Code 35s yet with us?
I've got one in the Focus, but I've never raced with it yet. I put it in a few weeks ago.
So not actually attending a race yet with it, but what do you think your strategy, does your strategy change having the Code 35s now? Do you anticipate it changing? Because I know some teams have already said, yes, it does.
It does. It does in certain ways that I could talk to you about over a non-alcohol beer. And in other ways, I think it's great from the aspect that you can go Code 35. Everybody has 35 miles an hour. The workers take care of the incident. They clear it off, and you're done. The only thing I don't like about it is it's not a full course yellow that packs up the field.
Right.
You're chasing somebody. That gives you a great opportunity to get a little bit closer. That's the only drawback to it. But you get more laps, more green flag laps, because it takes less time to do the yellows. I think what that thing is capable of doing in the future is really pretty amazing too.
Right.
And I think once people Flagtronics starts to release some of that stuff, it's really going to be great for ChampCar and the drivers to know a local yellow. If everything's perfect, it comes on, you get the local yellow, you slow down, you don't get a passing under yellow, black flag. The Code 35s, make sure you're doing the speed limit. Black flag, it flashes your number, so you know that you're the guy that the black flag is looking for. Something we were experimenting with back in the mid-90s is we had these little boxes in the car that was a little tiny timing device.
Yeah.
And it was for the marching ants.
Ah.
And
guess what I'm doing?
The stupidest thing in the world to ever see. But sure enough, we used it, and it had the driver's name with an arrow that points to the car. And IndyCar used it for a little while, and then NASCAR took it over with it, and they've used it with a lot of success. I think IndyCar's back to it again now, but that's something that Flagtronic has, as you know, because you're in charge of the marching ants. But it's pretty cool to see your car number and where you are on the track, and keep track of where your guy is.
There's some features I keep begging for over and over and over again from to James and Alaric about from Flagtronics. Of course, they say, okay, yeah, we'll work on that, and I haven't seen it yet, but they're coming out with some really big changes. We have one big change coming out here in a couple. Now you can go to Flagtronics and download or use the device manager and update your unit now. Just be aware that we're still going to come around to your car over the next few races to make sure you have the latest version. But they released one last week, and it basically it's overriding. So what happens? And we know that some teams have been caught out by this. Sometimes the corner workers will press yellow on their device at the station.
Okay.
We would be full course purple or Code 35, and they'd hit the yellow because the incident is right there, or something's happening right there, or something's happening. So we would have to manually go back through, because what happens when your unit turns yellow? 75% race speed, and that's what they were doing.
Yeah.
So we would catch that and fix it, but it would catch drivers off and upset people. And so we've got it now to where it automatically won't send that to the drivers. So
okay.
there's a fix for that. So, but yeah, just super easy. Just plug it in and use the device manager software and just update the firmware on it, and it'll be pretty cool. I think the pit timers are being used now in the car. That you guys haven't used it as a series yet, but I think the pit timers are. Yeah, they're in it now. Yeah, they're in it and working.
At the Autobahn.
As long as we get the the right pit lane picked, and that's the Autobahn first day kind of sucked. It's like, we had the pit lane marked wrong on it. So once we got that fixed for Sunday, it was all perfect. But there's some, it's a growing process for both Flagtronics and ChampCar, because there's so much more technology involved, and we have to make sure that we get it right, and it has to be 100%, because that's what you guys as the racers are expecting. I'm trying to integrate the marching ants and the logging system so that you know why you got black flagged. It'll tell you right there. So you don't have to, why am I getting
Okay.
black flagged? So if you've got a bumper falling off your car, hey, guess what, guys? We just got black flagged or meatballed or whatever, and the bumper's falling off. So you're ready with the tools, that kind of
Right.
stuff. So I think a lot of, feedback is a lot of teams are using it, but there's still a number that don't, and they don't realize how important that could be to their race. So
I think it is. And, as I said a little bit earlier, you get a black flag penalty for passing under yellow. I think is the most common penalty of all. Sometimes we go to some of these tracks and there could be 15, 20, 30 passing under yellow calls. You do that once, and that's a big chance that could take you out of contention for the race. So if Flagtronics can help you with that and keep you from getting that penalty, that's a feather in everybody's cap. I think the Trans Am series now is using Flagtronics.
Yeah, Trans Am SCCA is moving to it for their for the runoffs. Trans Am has been using it for a little over a year now, and the other associated events at those races, they use it. So I think SVRA or I don't know all the acronyms, but yeah, whatever series runs with Trans Am, that they're using it as well. So
yeah, there's a great little device for a lot of these short tracks too.
Yeah,
I don't know if they can put up with the financial part of it, but it'd be great for a quarter mile, half mile local dirt track or paved track. I think it'd really come in handy and save a lot of crash damage.
Yeah. It's, I've been spending, as we were talking earlier, I've been spending a lot of time at dirt tracks, and because I have a dirt track locally, and I love taking pictures there, and it's something I was thinking about. It's like, how could we use it here? Because they still have the old stoplights, the yellow, green, and they have all that up on there, and it works for them. But it's like, Flagtronics. That might be something they might be interested in. And did you know that these dirt track racers? Those big fat gummy looking tires they put on these these little stock cars? $200 a tire. They're cheaper than our tires, and they're much bigger.
I always thought they were more than that.
Yeah,
I think our local guys paid $280 for a Hoosier right rear midget tire.
Yeah, I was just like, he said, "Oh, these are $200 a tire," and I'm like, "Wow, that's pretty good."
But how long does it last?
I know.
More than one night?
Yeah. I don't know, and they come wrapped in cellophane, so I suspect they've been soaking them. So
I don't think the life of them is quite what we get out of even our sticky tires.
Yeah. What do you think of that? We've gone from the 180 tread wear tires is what the rules specify. We always say 200 tread wear, but it's actually 180 tread wear in ChampCar or higher.
Yeah.
And DOT. I want to say we didn't start seeing marbles on the track until 2018. And the first time I saw it was after I'd been doing some laps at Indy, and I could not figure out why that VW Touareg was bouncing all over the road. The Continentals were they were a great tire, but they were balanced, and, you could do, high speeds in that car and never notice the tires. Well, Ray and I were leaving the track. We pulled, I could not understand why the car was doing what it was doing. We pull in for breakfast on Monday morning and look at the tires, and they're just packed, caked with rubber all over it. What do you think the tires have done to this series and other series, with these tire wars going on?
Tire wars are tough. We went through that with Goodyear and Firestone. Firestone makes a excellent tire. It's got a lot of grip, and it stays grippy for your entire stint. Goodyear built junk, literally. Bobby Rahal was the last guy to run on Goodyear's. He finally switched to Firestone. His first comment was how easy everybody else has had it, just because the tires were so good. But we don't have a tire war. I don't think a spec tire works. That's awfully tough to do. Tires are tough. It's really hard to make a rule that's fair to everybody. The best thing to do to make your car faster is change your driver. The second thing to do to make your car faster is change your tire. And then there's a lot of tires out there that legitimately will make your car go 2.5, 3 seconds, 4 seconds a lap quicker.
Yeah.
But you're going to spend more money to do it. So, what's the trade-off? Do you spend $2,000, $2,500 a weekend on tires, or do you put in that lightweight clutch? You put in that lightweight flywheel. Do you do other things to, free up some horsepower, which all that costs money and reliability? Hey, nobody wants to go out and have everybody buy these sticky tires, and then everybody's fighting one another with the cost of it and the longevity of all of them. But it's not just the tire itself. On the other hand, too, it's the team that's got the smarts to have a really good setup, really good strategy. And the first thing, like I said, to make your car faster is the drivers. You got 3 ringers or 4 ringers that are driving for you. That's way better than virtually any tire is going to bring you. So everywhere I've been, if you're winning, I don't care if it's in midgets, stock cars, IndyCar, NASCAR. If you're winning, people are complaining about what you're doing. And the first thing, and I think in ChampCar, the first easiest thing to pick on is tires. And that might be right. It might be wrong, because there's so many things involved with a car and drivers and setup that tires become a small equation. And it's just unfortunate that the really good tires cost what they do.
Would you go sticky or wide? Which would be your preferred way to go?
Sticky. I mean, wide's not a way to go in a lot of cases. We don't run the speeds to get some of the fast cars, GBU, maybe some fast Camaros, other fast Corvettes. They go fast enough to get that tire hot. In a car like we have, and I would say 80%, maybe 85% of the cars out there, a wider tire is not going to help, because you're not getting the full footprint hot enough to take advantage of it all. Wide tires, you sometimes need a spacer. Our cars everybody's cars, for the most part, are notorious for wheel bearing problems, because these cars aren't made to be run the way we do. So you put a spacer on it with a wide offset tire, that's even harder on the knuckles and rear suspension parts and front suspension parts than what a stock tire would be. I run a 205 50-15. It's a Miata tire, basically. It's a small, narrow tread. I get, luckily, knock on wood, I get great mileage on bearings and drive shafts. I go the 8-10 hours without having to worry about having to come into the pit to fix some of those things. So reliability is a big thing for that. I run Cooper's, which Cooper's on the hit list for some of the sticky tires. We can go 6 to 8 hours on a set of fronts. I don't think you're ever going to get a front wheel drive car that's going to get good tire wear. A mid-engine car probably gets pretty good tire wear, front and rear, but
it does,
the front end's doing the steering and the driving. It's tough on tires. So I think 6 to 8 hours on a tire that costs $175 and is quick is not a bad trade-off.
Yeah, we used to get really good mileage with the Durezas. Troy gets pretty good mileage with his whatever RS. I think he uses an RS4. And I think whatever the fast tire is now that he got recently, really good mileage out of it. But I think that's a benefit of the mid-engine setup, is you can really save those tires.
Exactly. We used to run the Durazia 2 tires, and we were extremely happy with them. And then when Lonnie and Johnny came to Indy with us, he wanted us to run the Coopers. I said, Johnny, this tire has to be awful good for us to go ahead and change it out. So I went to the North Autobahn track, did a few laps on the Durazias to get a baseline, went out on the Coopers, and at the end of the day, it was exactly 4 seconds quicker a lap on a reasonably short track. So we've been using them ever since and have been real happy with them.
So, when you're done with the weekend, what is the first thing that you do when you look at the car? You get the car back to the shop, put it up on jack stands or up on a lift. What's the first thing that you do assessing how your weekend went?
Well, probably look at tire wear to see how the tire handled its last time that it was out on the car. See if it needs more camber or less camber, front and rear. by looking at how the tire wear is. Maybe there's too much toe. So then you got to think about how the car handled and what you need to maybe change and set up to try and get more tire life and get a better handling car. After every race, I look at the drive shafts. So they come apart and get re-greased. And on a Focus, bearings are pretty cheap, wheel bearings. So I take the old ones out, throw them away, buy new ones, re-grease them with some better grease than what comes in them. Usually there's like
what do you use for grease?
Teaspoonful of grease in them.
What do you use for grease?
I use the Joe Gibbs
okay.
high demand or high something grease. I use red line in the gearbox in the transaxle, and I use Joe Gibbs products and everything else. Engine oil, grease.
Even though Joe Gibbs really doesn't run, he doesn't really own that company anymore. But it's another.
I don't think he does. No.
Yeah.
But I learned about them quite a long time ago, and they don't make anything OEM.
Okay.
They don't have to meet emissions. They don't have to do anything for an OEM car. So that and some of the things I was taught by their salesmen and some of their technicians, I just find that there's other good oils out there too. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But I felt that the no OEM stuff really made for a better racing oil. Our Focus had 187,000 miles on it when I bought it. With the same engine, we put on 6,000 race miles, plus Friday practices and testing at the Autobahn. And I think a lot of that attributes to the Joe Gibbs oil.
Do you get a lot of help from Ford from John? For those that don't know,
John helps us out a lot. He's a Toyota guy, though.
Yeah, he is a Toyota guy, but he works for the OE. So,
yeah. No, that's one thing that's cool about the Focus SVT. It's a Cosworth, a Ford Cosworth head, and they actually made an extruded stainless steel header for it. It's not a pre-bent or welded together header. It's an extruded piece of stainless. And all my experience with Cosworth, I figured, hey, there's got to be something to this. So that's why that was one of my main reasons for going ahead and choosing the SVT.
Cosworth. So there's a little show on YouTube when they were developing the turbo engines in the 70s, and how they would put it on the dyno and it would fail constantly and they could not figure it out. And it took them a while to sort it out. But watching them go through the build of these cars using nothing but, mallets and, what do you call, measuring tools that you just look at and go, wow, that's the cavemen use that stuff, and, no computer, no computer design software, and just building to failure and then fixing from there. I thought that was a great little show.
It took them a long time to get a good Formula One engine. They did great with IndyCar, their IndyCar program. They had later in the life of the F1 cars, they were approaching 20,000 RPM.
Yeah,
with their little tiny turbocharged V8 that they use. Ours were only 1.8 liter. They revved to almost 14,000. They made 950 horsepower.
We're racing. We think that's crazy, but I swear I've heard ChampCars going down the front straightaway hitting 14,000 RPM too. Once.
Maybe a rotary?
Once. Usually parts falling out behind it.
In Europe, we had the opportunity to tour the Cosworth plant, and they do every single thing in-house. Yeah. They make their own carbon brackets, the whole ECUs. They make their own wiring harnesses, cast their own blocks, make their own crankshafts. If we break a crankshaft in the States, they stop the production line and change the radius in the crank just to try and make it more reliable. It really a phenomenal factory, and what an amazing place to be able to walk through.
Yeah, that was watching how they did their stuff over there was really cool. Now, sort of Toyota did the same thing, where back in the 80s they had this philosophy that if something broke, they would send an engineer over from Japan to figure out why it broke, and then he would go back to Japan and they'd fix it mid production, whatever car they had, doing warranty work and fixing things. So I always thought that was kind of cool. And GM started doing that too when Toyota was working with them. Late 80s, I think that was mid 80s to late 80s. So, what kind of advice do you have for ChampCar racers? Let's say that you've seen, even from our experienced ChampCar teams, that they might be doing wrong, or you could see, hey, you might want to look at doing something like this.
That's tough to say. I don't mean to I don't want to go and criticize somebody else for what they're doing, and it's tough to pick out what they might be doing wrong because you don't know, how they got to that point. I think the smartest thing to do is really do a lot of your preparation at home. I think that for the most part, the ChampCar guys do. You do go to a race and occasionally see a wheel bearing. They didn't replace it at home, so it failed for them on the weekend, or they have a braking problem that could have been taken care of ahead of time. When I first started building the car in 2017, I thought my experience really was a big help with car preparation and chassis setup with caster and camber and tow. And the first couple of years we competed with it, we really did exceptionally well. And at that time, it was a more or less, I would say, a full 100% builder series.
Right.
If you raced your car, you bought it and you built it and you raced it. Well, not everybody at the time had the knowledge of how to set up a race car. Nowadays, it's more what's moved into the arena is teams and cars that are arrive and drives. Big teams will make several race cars, offer it for rent for drivers to come in. Well, those teams are awfully experienced and they're awfully smart and they know what they're doing. So those guys are definitely know what they're doing, and it's hard to pick any flaws that they might have. But again, just getting back to doing your homework at home, even at the Autobahn, we had guys come in re-strapping down their cool shirt coolers. Just simple little things that kind of stuff will happen, but you got to do what you can to prevent it from happening. That way you don't have to come in and fix it and lose a lap or two or three, and you want to be on track. If it's a 7-hour race, you want to be out there for 7 hours. You don't want to be in the pits for 2 fixing a brake pad or brake caliper that's sticking. Rebuild, put new seals in your calipers maybe every 6 months, maybe for sure once a year. Go through the fuel cell, take the fuel cell apart, check the foam, check the fuel filters. You get a couple cases of beer for your buddy and come by on the weekend and go from bumper to bumper.
And that's something that I think a lot of guys don't realize, that foam with today's fuels can deteriorate like crazy. Even if the foam says, hey, good for today's fuels, it will still deteriorate to a certain point.
Yeah, the ethanol in today's fuel's pretty harsh, and it's only going to get worse because they keep talking about going to 15%. I think a lot of guys do truly run pump gas, 93 octane, or a little bit less if they can get away with it. So the ethanol in there will tear up the foam, and even regular rubber braided hose. I did go through the trouble putting on the new plastic lined hose that they have out now that's compatible with ethanol and methanol and all the other harsh fuels. And then it should last the car for the rest of its lifetime.
Yeah, and it's funny. I see guys running like 12 foot of fuel hose, this stuff on there. It's like, guys, just run tube. You can run it straight through your car. You don't have to put it in some big tube like some guys do, but you have to hose through a tube. But if it's actual metal tube, you can just run it through the inside of the car. And then at the ends, you just put in your anti-vibration hose, 6-8 inches of hose to whatever device you're using,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that. Everything that's exposed to the driver has to be in some kind of metal bulkhead, or fuel lines need to be in a metal tube of some sort, unless you're using the tube to hold the fuel.
Yeah. No, I think Ray said you could have the fuel going, just the fuel line itself in there, as long as it's metal, So
yeah, I did
4-inch metal tube with the fuel, right?
Yeah, yeah, for the full hose.
Or sorry, 3-inch.
Took care of that problem a couple years ago. Now everybody has to run with a balloon tank.
Yeah. Oh no. No balloon tanks. I don't want to get that email in the morning, Bill, to the office. So now, the pit stops. Do you guys practice pit stops now? Because you obviously you did back in the IndyCar days. You practice them constantly, right?
I've tens of thousands of tires at the shop on race weekends, practicing on race days. I won't say that we've actually practiced. I'm ashamed to say we haven't practiced at home to do pit stops, but all the guys on our team and many guys on other teams, we're all experienced at doing pit stops. It's just that this is choreographed a little bit differently. We're usually done with a minute 20, a minute 30 to go. So we wash the windshield. You know, you have to wash in the windshield, checking the oil. We always retorque the wheel bearings, check the lug nuts, and obviously do your fuel. I'm not one to leave anything alone, so I'm always messing with different things to make things a little bit quicker. I took a 5-gallon square fuel jug that everybody uses, and when I first got it, it took 45 seconds to empty it into another 5-gallon pail. You know, turn it upside down, and empty the contents. Well, I messed with all the fittings, changed different things, radius things, put different vents in it. I got it to dump in 14 seconds. So, now, in the car, it's a little bit slower because you have vent lines and all that. But I spent a lot of time trying to make a fuel jug flow a lot quicker. So that did speed up our fuel stops quite a lot. And, the guys know who's going to be on the fire extinguisher. Guys know who's going to be doing the fuel. One guy will check the oil and wash the windshield. One guy will torque has a job of torquing the axle nuts, rechecking the wheel lug nuts. And especially on a front wheel drive car, I find that it's very important to retorque axles. After you do 3 or 4 of them, they kind of find they're set and you don't need to do it again. But it is pretty important on the front wheel drive car to check them early on.
So we had that issue. We kept breaking rear axles. And once we got the engine movement down, stopped, we still broke them, and they would get loose on us. And then one of my drivers said, "Hey, we run 911s up in Canada, and they double nut their axles." And it's like, huh? So we did that. Never had an issue after that. And of course, people say, "Oh, don't double nut, Loctite or whatever." But yeah, we double nut them, and they worked fine. So.
Yeah, I just use the Loctite and one nut. I don't have enough. There's not enough threads to do a double nut. Otherwise, we would go that route.
Yeah, we found some like thinner nuts that we'd use for the first nut, and then a proper Toyota. I forget what they're like. Not a Castle one. Yeah, the Castle ones on the outside. So yeah.
If I get my act together and I get everything done, we might see 4 or 5 Focus at Gingerman this year. I think there's 3 signed up now, and I know of 2 more that are possibly going to be entered. And there's a website called Track Focused, and I've been on there several times sharing information. So other guys either get the inspiration to build a car to come join us, or help them with their track day things that they do. I've told them things we broke and how we fix them and how to do your maintenance. And there's been a couple of ChampCar teams I've talked to spread our learning experience onto them.
Now, the Ford Focus, that's a worldwide platform. Is the U.S. version the same as the rest of the world uses?
The European version, I think the base model was the same. Their RS obviously is quite a bit different than what we had over
right?
here.
Is that rear wheel drive?
Pardon me?
Was that rear wheel drive or front wheel drive?
No, the RS is front wheel drive. I think they make like 350 horsepower, bigger brakes, bigger bearings. A lot of things on it are changed. Those parts are impossible to find over here nowadays. But
because they're all in your garage.
Yeah, I wish. But there's quite a few SPT Focuses still around. Parts are starting to get a little bit hard to come by, but there's enough of them floating around that we could keep running this for a long time. The fenders are the same as a Focus, and doors and bumpers. The bumpers on a SVT are pretty pricey, so I always take them off and sell them on eBay, and then just buy the standard Focus bumper then, and put the splitter on it and stuff like that, just to save a little money and not waste a good SVT bumper.
Right. Yeah, we kind of do that with the MR2s. Take the good parts off and just put crappy ones on it, and or blanket or something like that. So yeah, because some of that stuff's getting kind of rare and hard to find.
Yeah. I guess there's some BMW stuff.
Yeah, they keep whining
That's
about how
fine.
they can't find
Yeah,
things.
but there's whining about it. That could be.
Fucking whingers.
That's another thing we did on our Black Focus. I put Aero on that maybe 3 years ago, and that helped it a lot. And I just finishing that up now on mine. I never thought for a second that Aero would help a front wheel drive car, but I think there's a lot of value to it.
Well, it's funny. I like watching a lot of European stuff. I also lived over there, and a lot of magazines I would read over there, Cars and Car Conversions, and they talk to the teams with these, with the British Touring Car Championship cars, BTCC, I think they were called, and they basically got rid of the wings. They had to be stock-looking cars at one point. The public hated it, so they allowed them to put these little skinny wings on it. They did absolutely nothing until they did. And it was one of those things like the Aero guys on the teams worked to get those wings and Aero parts not to, that wouldn't do anything, just look fast, do something. So that's pretty funny when you say, now, you've driven it with it work. So.
Yeah, there's a lot to that Aero stuff. And we had a rule change in 2000 when they made the rear diffuser, the under tray of the car, much smaller. It used to be like 14 inches tall. They made it down to something like 8. Well, Lola figured out how to make more downforce and less drag with less area. So it's, you give an engineer a clean sheet of paper,
right?
They're always going to find a way to make it better than what it used to be.
Yeah. I used to think it was funny when the Aero guys that worked in IMSA or wherever would walk by my Toyota MR2 with the big ass 14-inch cord wing, as wide as the body, and they'd laugh at it going, that's just not going to work, and it's like, dude, we take it off and we die. It's like, this thing works. It keeps it going that way. And that's all I care about. Don't really care about the downforce stuff. I just want it to keep going straight, because we have guys that drive our car that don't normally drive mid-engine cars. So you drive them differently. So, yeah.
They're a different beast.
Yeah. Now you also you have a hobby that's kind of cool. You build hot rods, not just race cars.
Yeah, so hot rods and custom cars. Currently have a 59 F100, a 32 Ford Roadster, a 35 Chevy Coupe, 57 Chevy that's coming out to be a show car, Morrison chassis underneath it, and a big Chevy, big block. Done tons and tons of body modifications, little tiny, simple, little subtle things, welded up door gaps, tucked in bumpers. We chopped the top 3/4 of an inch just to make a tiny subtle change that you hardly see. I've got a Celica I'll be finished up with here pretty soon that put a cage in for guys that are going to be running Lemons. So the race car thing has been pretty busy. Got some customers from the Autobahn. They're only like 40 minutes from us here, so I have a couple customers from there I routinely work on. Got a guy from the North Suburbs, got a BMW that he races in SCCA at Blackhawk Farms and Gingerman and Groton. So I do quite a bit of. It's a pretty fast, fancy BMW. There's no way it even could run a DC in ChampCar. It's a pretty quick car, but I do a lot of work for him. And the hot rod stuff is fun. I enjoy fabricating things and making stuff by hand, and a lot of my customers allow me to pretty much have free reign. If it's something pretty wild, I'll call them and or text them and give them a rundown of what I'd like to do. But for the most part, I get a green light on a lot of stuff.
So you do everything from the fabrication to the paint and everything?
Yeah, I do. I'll do rust repair work, fabricating of frames and sheet metal and trans tunnels and firewalls, headers, exhaust. I'll do Bondo work here, but I do sublet both priming and painting. That's got to be a whole different art nowadays.
I spend hours upon days on the road with Ray Frank, who is a paint and body guy, and I hear he comments about my body paint and body skills constantly. So, speaking of Ray Frank, I was walking around his yard and found a '66 Dodge Charger 444 barrel. I keep thinking, that would make a hell. Would you turn that into a Champ car? Would that be an awesome Champ car? Though it only has a 21-gallon tank or 20. It's a small tank. 18 gallon. I don't know.
Yeah.
But would that make a good car at like Daytona? I'm thinking it would.
I'm afraid that the cost of that car being restored might be a little more worthwhile than making a Champ car of it. No,
I don't know. There's got to be a point in time here soon when these collector cars are just going to drop because electric. Everybody wants their Jetson car.
I've been saying that for years, and it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
Market's still going.
I know.
Crazy high.
Yeah. I just think the only way I can ruin a car properly is to turn it into a race car. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, because nobody would let me drive a real put together classic car. People get mad at you for doing that. So,
yeah, the focus on preparing it for a wrap. I'm not gonna giving up on the paint on that
wrap. Oh, a wrap.
wrap. It's lighter than paint. It's a little more easier for me to fix. I could.
It's lighter than paint. Wraps are lighter than paint.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Huh.
And if you buy it and do it yourself, it ends up being pretty reasonably priced. Paint materials now. Ask Ray. Paint materials are just crazy high with base coat, clear coat, sealers, clears, hardeners.
Well, it's funny.
Catalyst.
Mark Dana, who's got a really cool little arrowed Miata down in South Florida, he was so happy with his wrap job, and I go up to it, it's like, wow, this is cool. And then the closer I got, I was like, oh wait, this is all kinds of pieces put together. And what he did is he owns I guess he owns a wrap shop or something, and all this scrap and stuff, he just saved it and then used that to do the whole car with all these little cut off scraps. And you could see little triangles and squares just all over. But from far away, it looks awesome. That's the way to do it.
Yeah, it didn't cost them very much to do that.
No. Let the customers pay for it, So, yeah. Well, Bernie, hey, it's been fun. And thank you very much for joining us. And I hope some folks out there learned a few things. And it's always great talking to you because I really like talking about the old days of racing. And we forgot to talk about the turbo V6s. I wanted to talk about those, but we might save that for when Brian gets back. We'll have you on again. So,
yeah, sounds great, Bill. Thanks for having me on again.
All right, thank you very much. And let me get my script out here. I have a script I have to follow. I don't want to give away all the secrets. Let me see. Press blue button number 2. That's going to do it for another episode of Inside Champ Car. Brian will be back with us next week. If you like what you just listened to, please like and subscribe to the podcast and the YouTube channel so you won't miss a future show or episode. We have a new podcast every week. I am Bill Strong. You're listening to the Racing Wire Podcast Network, and you're watching Champ Car live on YouTube.